Hello everyone, welcome back. I am Dr. Alexandra Mayer. If you're new to my channel, welcome. We're so excited that you're here. We have an awesome topic today. So today's video is on the diet that you've probably heard of, that everybody should be doing, that if you're a cycling woman, you probably should not be. Yes, that's exactly what I said. You probably should not be, and we're gonna talk about why. So first of all, if you're new to our channel, welcome. I am Dr. Alexandra Mayer. I am a naturopathic physician with a practice out here in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I created this channel specifically for women to help them with all things hormones, health, and aesthetics. If you like the content we're putting out, please go ahead and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and make sure to hit the notification bell, because that really helps us to kind of get our channel out there and get helping more women, which is our goal. So, without further ado, which diet are we talking about today? We're actually talking about intermittent fasting. So most people at this point have heard about intermittent fasting being touted as the next best thing in the diet, right? Why? So research on intermittent fasting does show that it improves blood glucose, improves lipid levels, can actually improve cancer risk, and can improve cardiovascular disease risk. So you might be thinking, well, Dr. Alex, why on earth would you tell me that this is not not the right diet for me? That doesn't make any sense. I want all of those things. What I'm saying is, if you are a cycling woman, if you are premenopausal, the research actually shows that intermittent fasting could be negatively impacting you. So most of the research on intermittent fasting is done on men. And there are a few studies that are done on postmenopausal women that are very beneficial. So in men and in postmenopausal women, intermittent fasting has shown benefit. In premenopausal women, or women who are actually cycling, intermittent fasting could actually be doing a lot more harm than good, and the research does show that. So let's talk a little bit about why, right? Like, what's the difference? So, first of all, there are a lot of differences. You've heard me say on this channel a million times, we are not just little men. I'm just gonna say it again, we are not just little men. And so, although research in the medical community doesn't always do super great at communicating that, I think that's something to keep in mind. So let's kind of dive into the hormone cycle a little bit, because then we'll understand a little bit more why this may not be the diet that is best for you. So when we think about this, we're looking at the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. So basically the HPG axis. This is how the brain communicates to the ovaries and says, hey, we need you to make some hormone. So basically the brain makes something called gonadotropin releasing hormone, or GnRH. And GnRH signals FSH and LH production, follicle stimulating hormone production, and luteinizing hormone production, which then signals the ovaries to mature a follicle and to release an egg. So basically signaling the hormone production in a cycling woman's body. So prior to GnRH production, there is a peptide called kisspeptin. And kisspeptin is an important signaling peptide for GnRH production. So what's interesting about kisspeptin is a couple things. Women have higher levels of kisspeptin than men do, and kisspeptin is really affected by caloric intake. It actually is kind of watching your caloric intake, and it's one of the first things that will drop. A 2018 research study in PCOS women greatly showed this. So PCOS women tend to have higher levels of kisspeptin, and they found that with intermittent fasting, their kisspeptin levels dropped a lot. But what about if you don't have PCOS? Or what about if you don't have higher levels of kisspeptin, right? If you have normal levels of kisspeptin, then that kisspeptin will drop. If we're not getting enough calories, GnRH will drop, LH and FSH will drop, and then progesterone and estrogen can also drop. So on top of all of that, right, because it's not enough already, on top of all of that, one of the other things that has been shown is related to protein intake in women, right? So I see this a lot in my patients actually, where what will happen is they shorten their fasting window and they are eating in a specific window of time. which usually indicates caloric restriction. A lot of the research on intermittent fasting, some of the benefits that come from intermittent fasting is actually due to caloric restriction. Okay, so a lot of women are already not eating enough protein and are already not eating enough calories. And then we add intermittent fasting on, and we shorten the window that they eat, and then they eat less. What research shows in women in terms of protein intake and amino acid levels, right, so the building block of protein, is that with decreases in protein and decreases in amino acid status, women, they tend to see an impairment in estrogen receptors and an impairment in insulin-like growth factor 1, both of which are necessary to thicken the endometrial lining, right, and create a normal uterus lining. So that's one of the mechanisms as to why decreased protein intake in women can greatly impact fertility. So you might think, well, Dr. Alex, I don't care, right? I don't want to be pregnant right now. It doesn't matter to me. It still does, and here's why. So estrogen and progesterone are super necessary for a whole bunch of different things in the body. They're necessary for healthy sleep, necessary for good mood, necessary for good digestion, necessary for good bone health. But if that's not enough for you, estrogen is also necessary for metabolism, appetite modulation, and fat storage. So what I mean by this is that we see that with lower levels of estrogen tend to impact appetite modulating signals in the body, appetite modulating peptides. So what you may find if you're fasting as a cycling woman and estrogen is dropping, that you're hungry all the time, right? And that's because as estrogen drops, your appetite can actually increase. The other thing that can increase is fat storage. Well, lucky us, right? We do intermittent fasting to maintain weight, get leaner, and then we find that as estrogen drops, fat storage also tends to increase. We see this a lot in postmenopausal women. So they've actually done a lot of research studies on postmenopausal women where they will look at the distribution of fat storage in the body. And what they find is that with declines in estrogen, fat tends to go from the gluteofemoral, like hips and thighs associated with fertility, up to the abdomen. And this happens even in really thin postmenopausal women. So as estrogen declines, it really changes the way our bodies store fat. And as if that isn't enough research and enough reasons why we may not want to do intermittent fasting, there was actually a 2005 study that compared men and women with intermittent fasting. And what they did was they had them fast for 3 weeks, and they had them do basically alternating days of intermittent fasting. So they fasted one day and then not the next day. And they found that after 3 weeks of intermittent fasting, men had improvements in blood sugar and improvements in insulin levels. Awesome, right? Women had no improvement in insulin levels and actually had impairment, so worsening of their blood sugar levels. So really the research at this point is definitely indicating that if you are a cycling woman, intermittent fasting may not be the right choice for you, right? And if you just go at it from like a basic biology perspective, right? So we talked about GnRH, we talked about FSH, we talked about kisspeptin, we talked about all these super sciencey things. Let's boil it down, right? So if we boil it down to a super just basic instinctual level, our bodies are really, really smart, and basically everything that our body does with our cycle is designed to determine, is it a safe and good time to get pregnant or a not safe and good time to get pregnant, right? And so if there is not enough calories, your body will lower your hormone production because it's saying, no, this is not a good time, right? We cannot handle this right now. And there are a whole bunch of negative impacts that come with that. There are a couple caveats to this, and the caveat to this is in polycystic ovary syndrome women. So I briefly mentioned the 2018 research study on polycystic ovary syndrome women. And what they found in that study is that polycystic ovary syndrome women tend to have higher levels of kisspeptin. And with intermittent fasting, their levels of kisspeptin really actually dropped quite quickly. But in those patients was a benefit because it dropped it down to normal levels. So what they found is that their testosterone kind of sensitivity and their testosterone levels normalized, and their insulin levels were better, when PCOS patients, when PCOS women with higher levels of kisspeptin did intermittent fasting. So basically, the take home of this is if you are a cycling woman, first of all, you're not just a little man, so we need to look at research actually in women. And that intermittent fasting, honestly, if you have a normal cycle, may not be a really good treatment strategy and may not give you the results that you're looking for and could actually negatively impact both your hormone production and your weight, which is normally the reason why most people intermittent fast. So tell me in the comments below, have you ever intermittent fasted and what was your experience with it? Because I'm really curious to know. I know for myself, I have definitely done some fasting with my partner in the past, and I do not do well fasting, and he does great. And so I think this research really does show up a lot in real life experiences, especially between couples. So I'm interested to know about that. And if you love the content that we're putting out, please go ahead and hit the like button. It really, really helps us. Also drop a comment below, because the more people who comment, like, share, and just promote our videos, the more people are gonna see them. See you next week.